All right. So normally when I do an interview, I try to do a lot of prep work and, to make sure that I know who I'm talking to. But I purposely today didn't, mainly because most people who are young or maybe just kind of not into politics, where that's okay too, if people aren't into politics, they only know about what's going on right now with Biden versus Donald Trump, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I kind of want to come at the angle of like, I don't know who you are. I just moved here in Minnesota 3 years ago. I know,
Oh
I know there's young people who don't follow the intricacies and details of the election. So I have no idea who you are.
yeah.
I have no idea what you stand for. I have no idea how you can help me as a person here in the Twin Cities.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that would be the best way to go into this, because it's better than pretending like, hey, this is what you do, this is how great you are. But what you need to do is want to be an elected official from us.
Mm-hmm.
So we want to know in the most shallowest way, what can you do for us? Why are you going to be the best person to vote for? I can't even tell you necessarily what office you're running for. So excuse the ignorance over here, but I think this is the best way for a young person who knows about Drake, who knows about Travis Scott, who knows
Mm-hmm.
about Uptown, who knows about what happened over the summer with George Floyd, who knows about the great cities of Minneapolis, St. Paul. But who are you? What can you do for us? It sounds very shallow, but I think that this is probably the best and direct way for a young person, or not even a young person, a person who only knows, all we see is Trump versus Biden. So I
Yeah.
would love for you to introduce yourself and to give us the scoop on why we should support you.
I think that's an awesome intro. I actually really like that a lot. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll just start from the beginning. As I said, my name is Esther Agbaje. I am running to be the next state representative for my district. So the state representative seat is in the Minnesota legislature. So every state has its own legislative body, and they're the ones that make the laws specific to the state. And so anything that having to do with your driver's license, taxes and fees, housing, education, healthcare, all of that stuff that happens at the local level, that's all done with the Minnesota State Legislature. And so I'm running to be in their House of Representatives, which currently is a body that has about 134 people. So if I win, I would be one of the 134.
134 people in overall around the U.S. or
around the state
wow.
of Minnesota. Yeah.
Okay.
So there's two representatives that come. So Minnesota has 67 districts, and there's two representatives that come from each district to make up the House of Representatives in Minnesota.
And so it's one from a Democrat and normally one from Republican, or not necessarily?
Nope, they can be from both parties, either party. We've not yet had anyone from like a third party, but that's always a possibility too. So that's why it's really important for people to look at their ballot and figure out whose values most align with them. So I am running on the Democrat ticket, and so with all that comes with. But what my specific values are and what my election has been focused about has been inclusivity and community wellness. And so the way I see those two things working is making sure that us as Minnesota become a much more inclusive state, which means that we are actually tackling the disparities head first, that are disparities between Black children and white children when it comes to education, disparities in healthcare. We know that Black maternal rates in the hospitals are not good when Black mothers go in, so we want to make sure that gets better. Particularly on housing. Housing is actually a really issue close to my heart. We're still a segregated city in the Minneapolis, St. Paul area. And so working to break down those barriers, making sure that, that everyone is housed, breaking down those pathways to home ownership, particularly for Black and brown people, should they desire it, and making sure we're living in mixed income neighborhoods. So we no longer have these concentrations of poverty and neither these concentrations of wealth. So we're all kind of living together, mixing together, learning from each other. So that's, those are the types of things that, I really care about. I also care about environmental justice. And I look at that from the perspective of not just conservation efforts, but also to make sure that we all have access to clean water, clean air, healthy, nutritious food, because that is the foundation for healthy people. So then that way, you can do better in school. You have the ability to take care of your health. And if you're a healthy person, then that means you can hold down a job better. So for me, I see housing and environmental justice really intertwined of the building blocks of what leads to a thriving community. Because when you have those things, when people know where they're staying at night and that their environment is healthy, then you can then use the rest of your energy to focus on, okay, let me get my education, let me get a job. We can work with small businesses, making sure that, the loans that they receive, particularly for Black and brown businesses, are at the same rates that other white businesses get, so they're not saddled with that debt. How are we expanding that growth? How are we looking at transportation so people can move to and from school, work, play? All of those things can get done when you have those foundational basics. So that's what I'm running on, and that's what I want to do for people. You asked the question, what will I do for you?
Yeah.
If I get in, a really big part of my agenda is making sure that we are providing housing for people, making sure that people who are renting, their rights are protected. One thing I really want to do is making sure that, if you have ever been, a landlord has ever said, oh, I'm going to evict you, and they actually went and filed the paperwork, but then nothing came of that, like you were never actually evicted, that never goes on your record, right? That's a really big thing, because right now that happens a lot. A lot of landlords use it as a threat, and they'll go down, they'll file the paperwork, but then they'll come to an agreement with you, or you actually get found that you're able to keep your home. But that doesn't go away because they just filed it, and that's wrong because you were never actually adjudicated to be evicted, and that prevents a lot of people from finding their next place to live. So that's a big thing I really want to get rid of. And then just, and then working more with like our urban agriculture communities, because there's been so many people, particularly up on the north side, that have been focused on like building that resiliency, that food resiliency, to make sure that we have the resources that we need to survive the next man-made or physical disaster. One thing I didn't talk about, but the area that I am seeking to represent covers.
Yeah, I was going to ask that. What area specifically? Yeah.
It covers downtown Minneapolis into North Minneapolis. So the border is essentially like on the north is Broadway Avenue, and then all the way down into downtown Minneapolis with the neighborhoods of Harrison, Willard Hay, and then parts of Bryn Mawr. So that would be the area of the Twin Cities that I would be representing.
So have you ever, this is your first year running for this office?
I'm running for anything.
And how and why and what was the, what made you want to do that this year? And, very briefly, maybe what's the journey to that?
Yeah.
And where are you from?
Yes, I am from Minnesota. I grew up in St. Paul, and I lived in Brainerd and also in Faribault. So my dad is a priest in the Episcopal Church, and so that job kind of requires you to move around a little bit, and so that's why we moved to different parts of Minnesota. I have also lived in other parts of the country. I did my college and my first job out on the East Coast, and then I worked as a State Department official, so working on Middle East policy. So actually a lot of the type of stuff that, the U.S. government encourages other countries to do, of like making sure the rights of women are protected, making sure marginalized communities are protected, advancing the rights of freedom of speech and freedom of assembly. So a lot of like things that protesters are doing. We weren't really doing that great of a job here in the U.S. And so that to me said, okay, well, how do the laws in the U.S. work with like the policies in the U.S.? And so I said I wanted to go to law school. And I went to law school, and then afterward I said, okay, well, I want to come home to Minnesota. So I started practicing here about 3 years ago. So I practice mostly medical malpractice on the plaintiff side. So if you've been hurt or injured by a doctor or in an accident, that's mostly the type of law I practice. But I have also had the opportunity to do some class action lawsuits. And one that I'm really proud of is a case that we ended up settling, but it was against the Minnesota Department of Corrections because they weren't providing hepatitis C medication to prisoners. And so in our settlement agreement, they now have to do that. That's the short gist of it, but there's some other caveats along the way. But really right now, prisoners who are in Minnesota Department of Corrections, if they have hepatitis C, they're now getting treatment. So we're really proud of that.
Sheesh, it's a lot. First of all, I want to say, shout out to your team, because as far as I know, how many representatives are there around the Twin Cities, would you say, that people are running for?
I would say of the districts in the Twin Cities, there's probably about 20-ish or so districts that cover the Twin Cities area. Right. Yeah.
You're the only one that's reached out to me, at least in our radio station, to reach out to the audience. So, definitely that's cool. So I'm going to give you just real quick, a couple hot words that we see a lot, and you know, maybe you could give kind of like a small little brief answer, and maybe it's something that you don't necessarily handle. Maybe you could give us a small, you know, inside of how you feel about things. So let's start with the encampments at some of the parks that we have. I live right by one of these parks, and you know, I definitely see the plus side of where else are they going to go? How do we handle that? How do you imagine how we handle that, especially with the weather being cold? And, you know, what rights do you believe that they have?
Yeah. I mean, we have to do better as a society. Like, people should not be sleeping outside, first and foremost. There's no reason why that should happen, not only in a state like this, but in a country like this. I think one of the things that we can do first and foremost is making sure that there are resources flowing to the city and to the county, most likely from the state. So we need to allocate more of those funds from the state to make sure that we're either building transitional or permanent housing, because we need to get people inside. We're helping, you know, cities and counties being able to purchase, you know, hotel rooms, apartment buildings, you know, really making use of like the vacancies that we have right now, especially because of COVID. You know, a lot of hotels are sitting empty. So that's an area. And I see that the county, especially Hennepin County, is doing great work in that space. So I think at the state level, we need to be a much better supporter to make sure that we're getting people out of encampments, making sure that they're in, you know, housing that has support services for them. Because many of them, you know, whether it's a mental health issue, a substance abuse issue, or maybe it's a domestic violence issue that they're fleeing or something, but, you know, there's resources that they need in addition to the housing. So I think that those should be like our first steps. And we all talk about this a lot, and there have been a lot of pilot projects that have happened, but we need to make sure that those are, you know, funded to the best ability that they can be, and that they're working in collaboration and concentration with each other to make sure we're getting people what they need.
Very important. Thank you. All right. Next hot button or hot words, defund the police.
Yeah, yes, that is. I have talked to people across the spectrum on this issue. And, you know, to be honest, I actually think that what people say, no matter where they fall on it, resonates with the basic idea that people want to feel safe in their communities, and people want to be able to come home at the end of the night, regardless of whatever interactions they have. I think it's crucially important that we are, you know, divesting away from this like militarization of the police, from, you know, giving police all these, what I call them, like toys, basically to terrorize people that we've seen. And we really need to make sure that the police are right sized to actually do the specific job they're supposed to do. And there's many other jobs that right now police are handling, from traffic, you know, traffic tickets and violations, mental health. They're called out for mental health calls. They're called out for DV calls. They're called out for all sorts of things that we know that there are other professionals that are better situated for those. So we need to make sure that those resources are then going to support those other institutions, so that way those workers have the ability and the tools that they need to confront those situations. So I think that's where I think this discussion is going into, like, how do we imagine public safety? What does that look like for our community? What is the role of community members in that? I think a big part of that is making sure people's basic needs are met, and that makes people less likely to engage in behaviors that could be destructive. And also just making sure that we are focused on public safety and what that means for the community. And then we'll figure out kind of where those roles fall.
Great. That's great. And George Floyd.
Another, you know, a very tragic situation, and another person who didn't have to die, another person who should be here with us right now. I hope that what we learn from this is that this is the time to be imaginative of what our community should be and what it should look like, and that it is time to value the lives of Black people. We can't just be seen as this like collateral damage in this, you know, fight for something. I'm not even sure what it is, but we seem to keep getting caught up in it, right? So what I really hope that it stops, you know, because we've seen it continue though. I mean, we just got the verdict, or the non-indictment really, from the Breonna Taylor case about a week or so ago, and it just continues to show that America just kind of keeps on going, right? But we do know that that there are ways to work on this issue. There are ways to address racism. There are ways to be anti-racist, and we need to keep uplifting that. We need to keep uplifting our community. We need to keep engaging with each other so that way our systems continue to break down those racial barriers.
All right, I got last two questions. Number one, what does Esther listen to? What's your favorite music?
Oh gosh!
Your favorite artist? What do you listen to when you clean the house? You know?
Okay, so I'm kind of a nerd, so I do listen to a lot of like Broadway musicals.
Oh, okay, all right. Did you like Hamilton? Were you a fan of Hamilton?
I was a fan of Hamilton, but I'm more of a fan of things like Rent and Aida and stuff like that. So, but Hamilton was good. Hamilton was alright. In the Heights is a lot better. I have been listening to a lot of. I really like Nelly Furtado. I know she's kind of old school, but I really like.
You love that legend.
I really liked her in the past. And then who else was recent? Oh, and I'm also like a big like UK R&B person, so I really love Craig David.
Hey, Craig David, of course, Fill Me In and all that. Days, that's amazing. Well, thank you very much. Last but not least, some people may sit through a 5 to 10 minute interview, some may not. So a lot of times I like to just pull one little clip, and I want Esther Agbaje, am I saying that?
Yes.
I want Esther Agbaje to tell people, young people who may be interested in politics, who aren't interested in politics right now, why they should vote for you.
You should vote for me because we need to see more young people, more women of color, more Black people in the decision-making room. And also because we have awesome ideas. And so if you want those similar types of ideas, if you want to work with us, help us get out the vote, let me know, estheragbaje.com, and you can follow us on social media at @GoForEsther.
I love it. Oh. Okay, one last question. Just for my knowledge, possibly, how many people of color and women are represented in the state?
So there are currently 3 Black women in the Minnesota House of Representatives right now. And if the election goes the way it's supposed to, if I get elected and another woman out of St. Paul, Athena Hollins, gets elected, then it'll be five Black women.
Well, I appreciate you. Salute to you for wanting to even be involved in this crazy, election and everything. That says a lot to me. And we appreciate you spending time with us and reaching out to us here at Go Radio, because I think, your team didn't overlook us, and I made sure that I responded, and hoping other, people who are running for office might not overlook us and spend a little time with us. And, I'll be sure to, look deeper in what you're going to do, and I really appreciate it. How can they find you or find more information about you?
Yes, estheragbaje.com is the website, and then @GoForEsther on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And I just want to say thank you so much for responding, because my campaign manager loves your station. She was so excited that you guys responded to our request. So yeah, I mean, we just want to reach listeners wherever they are, and really just remind people how important this election is.
Well, maybe you need to give us a try. Today at noon, I'll be in the mix, so maybe you could dig it. It's a Throwback Thursday, so
hey.
You'll enjoy it. I might have to try to get some Nelly Furtado for you. And if you do win, and if you are elected, we would love to keep this line of communication open. I don't want you to just reach out to us when you need us. So maybe we can meet in person and have lunch, and maybe we can help you get your voice out there more. We really appreciate it.
Definitely. Looking forward to, if all goes well, looking forward to talking more with people and letting them know what we're doing and how they can be engaged. So.
All right, Esther, I appreciate you spending time with us, and good luck, all right?
Thank you.
Yep, bye-bye.